giving you a chance, sweetie.
Say when.
When?
Venom: The Last Dance is Sony's new mega blockbuster that is continuing the trend of creating superhero movies based on Marvel properties and turning famous Spider-Man villains into heroes in their own movies. And since Venom 1 kicked off this franchise, and I'm talking about all of Sony's Marvel Universe, back in 2018, the track record for all these movies have been pretty awful. Venom, the first movie, was a broken movie, and if you've seen my review for Madam Web, I go through all of this in there. Now, I've been watching this new HBO TV show called The Franchise, which deals with superhero movie making and how hard and messy it is to make these blockbuster franchise movies. And that show is a satire and chronicles all of the small and ridiculous demands studios have to make these movies. Now, most of the time, they end up making something resembling more of a broken product than an actual film. Films like Madam Web, the last few Venom films, even Morbius, and now this latest Venom film feel like a broken product that the show is talking about. All of these Sony movies aren't really movies, they are essentially broken stories. Because they don't function as movies. They take a property that is known, like Spider-Man or Venom, to make money, they build a semblance of a story around it, and they put it into theaters and call it a day. And somehow, and I think because this is pure brain rot fun, if you want to compare this to Joker 2 or something, Venom 3 is pretty successful. All of these movies, the Venom films, have been successful and grossed money. Madam Web and Morbius did not. Somehow Venom just worked, being very silly, having this name built around itself. And interestingly enough, the films themselves have degraded in quality as they've gone on, but for a movie like this, a film that I will declare is so bad it's good, this isn't really a terrible thing. Venom 3 has no business existing. It is an insult to the structure of blockbuster films that used to actually put effort into story, into visuals, into its characters. It is an insult to franchise filmmaking. We used to get films like the Indiana Jones trilogy, the original Star Wars trilogy, Back to the Future, the first two Godfathers, the first two Spider-Mans, and the Dark Knight films, which all managed to tell a great story and do everything else a great movie should do. They made going to see a movie worth the price of admission. When you saw Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, you got something in the movie you couldn't see anywhere else. You got amazing stunt pieces, like something you didn't even see in the last movie. You had Indiana Jones jumping out of a plane, in a raft, into a river. There's a fight on a drawbridge against men with swords. There's a rail chase in a cave under a palace. Human sacrifice and an opening car chase sequence on a runway in Hong Kong at an airport. And even movies like The Dark Knight had great story and great action pieces. The Dark Knight has some of the most iconic action in modern blockbusters, and it didn't even have to sacrifice the story. It told an amazing, brilliant story while giving you great action. In those movies, everything happens for a reason. I can't really begin to tell you what Venom 3 is about, or what the supposed plot for this movie is. It's funny because at least Venom 2 had some kind of build-up. If you want to stay for the post-credit scene of the first Venom, they hinted at what was to come. Now, it wasn't really anything big, they just filmed a cameo with Woody Harrelson, hoping the movie would make money, and when it did, they just shot the sequel with Woody Harrelson as Carnage, and it still was really lacking. It wasn't like it had that much depth. It was a Saturday morning cartoon, but in 90 minutes. It was pure brain rot fun. Venom: Let There Be Carnage also had a really brief 90 minutes of runtime. It had comedy, it had action, it had Andy Serkis behind the camera. It had a really fun villain with Woody Harrelson as Carnage and even Naomi Harris as Shriek, which makes for a campy good time in this buddy comedy between them. The two had good chemistry. And even that movie had serious problems on the superhero side. I kind of realized after the first Venom, these movies were not going to be typical superhero movies. No, Sony Marvel movies are not typical superhero films. It just has the name of a character and builds a story around that. It's almost like you are being conned. Sony are basically con artists, tricking you into thinking you're going to get a superhero movie or something resembling one, but these movies are far from that. Venom: Let There Be Carnage was fun, but it barely has any moments where Eddie Brock actually has to overcome some kind of obstacle to be a hero and save the day. Same with this film. Even in the first one, which was incredibly boring and simple, he just had to stop this corrupt tech CEO played by Riz Ahmed, who he was doing a news article on from using this Venom symbiote and becoming evil. It's not like Eddie has some personal agency to stop this guy. Yeah, Michelle Williams, who was his girlfriend in the first movie, was in danger, but that was pretty much it. These movies don't build big worlds where you really get to care about the characters. For example, in Spider-Man, Peter Parker fights the Green Goblin, but there's multiple motivations to do this. He discovers he has powers and wants to use them for good. He wants to impress MJ, and then when she's in danger, he ends up saving her. He has a mentor-student relationship with Norman Osborn, who's like a father to him. And when he turns on him, it results in this strong inner conflict. In the Spider-Man movies, at least the first two, Peter Parker has agency. He has needs. He has clear goals and motives. The issue with Venom 3 is there's no motive. It's just lacking one entirely. Our main character, Eddie Brock, just stumbles through the movie aimlessly. In fact, I had a feeling back when I saw Bad Boys for Life and the Venom 3 trailer first dropped, that this movie would be absolutely terrible. That movie trailer included the line, "We are fugitives." That's what Venom tells Eddie Brock. And usually movie trailers like to drop something really big, a really big piece of dialogue or a big piece of conflict to make you want to see the movie. And the fact that the trailer really had nothing kind of just told me that the movie would have nothing to say. The fact that the trailer mostly just showed Eddie Brock running through a bunch of different environments and not really interacting with that many other characters kind of showed me that not a lot happens in this movie. And I was right. Eddie Brock has no motive in Venom: The Last Dance. As they say in the trailer, he's just a fugitive. He's just on the run, running. That's the whole movie. He has nowhere to go, nowhere he really wants to be. They mention New York, but it's not like he has a real reason to be there. His character arc simply picks up right after the last movie, which came out 3 years ago. And I don't know about you guys, but these movies that come out so long after the last film should at least build their own arc. Anyway, Eddie's on the run from the authorities after being framed for the murder of Stephen Graham's character in the last movie. I completely forgot about that. I remembered Stephen Graham, but I'm like, he's dead? Okay. So this quite literally just picks up with him at that bar in Mexico where he was at the end of No Way Home. And don't even get me started on that. Whoever has picked up a comic book or cares about the possibilities of making a great Marvel film knows that Venom could have been incorporated into Spider-Man. And the fact that this is apparently Tom Hardy's last Venom movie, we've got no interaction with Spider-Man, just makes no sense at all. They have the ability to do it. It might take a lot of work and great writing, but the fact that no studio has been able to put out a Venom Spider-Man movie and given us something just like this shows we are kind of fucked where Marvel's at. Anyway, that just brings me to my point that the main character doesn't have any motive in his own movie, which brings the whole movie down. We were just watching Eddie Brock kind of stumble his way through Mexico as a fugitive in the beginning. And it isn't like he has any desire or determination to do any heroic acts. The first time we see Venom come out, it's so forced and so unnatural. Eddie simply gets drunk, walks into a sketchy dogfighting arena that he doesn't even know is a dogfighting arena, because according to Venom, who lives in his head, oh, people could be in trouble and I need energy to refuel. And that sentence just explains what's wrong with the movie. Firstly, no one's ever in trouble. If the movie was good, it would build up actual problems and actual danger for our main character to get himself into or to want to seek out. Eddie's just drunk, so he walks into some creepy building filled with dogs, and he discovers a pamphlet on the floor, and he just simply goes, "They're fighting dogs in here." And then Venom's like, "Oh, I don't like anyone who hurts animals." So now we have to fight these guys. Then these guys just appear with guns and tattoos, and they look like bad guys. And then Venom just appears and devours them all. And it's his first superhero act of the movie. There's just one major problem with this, and it totally comes out of nowhere. The dogfighting arena was not built up to at all. Venom and Eddie's motive to stop these guys simply occurs because they're in the right place, and not because they even want to help anyone. Venom just needs to eat people to survive. The film could have had Eddie trying desperately to escape Mexico or hide out unnoticed, where he's constantly running into trouble. Maybe he gets onto a bus, and then the bus is hijacked, and then when the bus driver or some innocent person on the bus is in danger, Venom can come out and transform and save the day. This movie needs action that feels like it fits in with the plot. The main reason people are going to see this movie is because of the action. Action shouldn't just happen because the movie knows people want to see Venom and they'll do it at any cost. It's like they're doing it in the most lazy way possible. If you're going to make a movie, you need to build up your story and do it strong. You can't just throw things together and hope they will stick. Venom 3 is so aimless with its plot, and its story is fun but goes nowhere. This is fine for a loose viewing experience, but it makes the movie so bad it's good to me. It's not really even a movie at all. It just seems embarrassing that the studio has access to this hugely popular character and can only make a movie as simple as this. And the biggest issue for me with the movie is the villain. Seriously, this has to be one of the most bafflingly insane third acts ever put to a movie. And the fact that there is no true villain in this film is even crazier. I guess you could say the villain of the movie is Null. He's this major villain from the comics, a god of symbiotes, an extremely powerful being who is responsible for creating Venom and all the other symbiotes from his planet. And you think a character like this would be built up to. The fact that the first Venom could drop a post-credit scene and reference him and maybe even let there be carnage could further hint at Null's arrival, but did they do that? No. Does this movie, the third movie in this franchise, introduce Null? Yes, they do. How do you think? Well, by having him talk to the audience right off the bat. Like, the movie just starts and you just hear, "I am Null, slicer of worlds, god of symbiotes. I have been imprisoned and I long to be freed." The movie just opens with this unseen figure narrating to us, and it's incredibly jarring. Seriously, I have never seen a movie open with some villain that's never been introduced just narrating and explaining the plot. It's absolutely so fucking lazy. And an example of something like this that actually could work is in 2018 with Avengers Infinity War, which had plenty of reason to work. That movie introduced Thanos right off the bat. He had been introduced previously in other franchise films like Guardians of the Galaxy, the end of the Avengers movies. He had been built up. And if you'd seen Thor Ragnarok, you knew Thanos was coming because that movie literally ends with a massive ship approaching. So for 2018's Avengers Infinity War to open with a monologue from a villain, it was actually Ebony Maw saying to bow before the Mad Titan. That works because everything had been built up to, and then you have this really dark opening scene. And I really like that. But in this movie, Thanos is not the main villain. Null has barely been mentioned. He's never been mentioned once. So it's crazy that he's not even in the rest of the movie. Like, Thanos is a main character in Avengers Infinity War. He appears throughout the film. He interacts with a lot of characters. He has a great role in that. In this movie, Null's barely in it. So why are you going to introduce this main villain and then barely even have him in it? He literally just introduces himself over voiceover, which in Hollywood structure is the laziest thing you could do. He dumps a ton of exposition about how he's been imprisoned on his home planet by the symbiotes and longs to be free. And one of the major issues with this is the filmmakers just never do anything with Null. He seriously just remains on his home planet for most of the movie in prison, and there's a post-credit scene that hints he will appear in a future movie, but then what the fuck was the point of this movie? I kid you not, the only thing we have in the villain in this film are these giant symbiote bug creatures that literally just appear without any dramatic reveal. Eddie's climbing out of that dogfight arena in Mexico, and then the camera just pans up and we see these bugs are watching him. This movie, it's so frustrating. And it's also really frustrating because of the plot device it shoves in there. Similar to Man of Steel, there's this thing called the Codex that Null's after. It's some fucking stupid plot device. Basically, Venom has this Codex in him and he's on Earth. And the only way Null can be freed from his prison is if he kills Venom, and thereby he's going to kill Eddie Brock. And I will say, this could have been a great story. You already have the great buddy comedy of Eddie Brock and Venom, who's also voiced by Tom Hardy. You have this major threat in Null and this theme of Eddie being on the run. But what does it do with that theme? Pretty much nothing. It's not like while being on the run, Eddie discovers anything about himself or learns that he's actually meant to be a hero or wants to raise a family. And it's really frustrating because the movie fucking hints at that. And then the movie repeats a mistake that no movie should ever repeat, where it copies the worst part of 2017's Justice League. This film, like that one, includes this small subplot just to further the fact that there are people in this film. And we follow this family who are trying to see Area 51. And by the way, they cast Riz Safan as the father in order to include him in this shot in the trailer. So all the Marvel fans will believe there's some connection to Kirk Connors of the Lizard. Even though we already know Sony's too fucking dumb to actually do something with that. But it's free advertising, so I will give them credit for that. But the awful thing here is they're copying this Justice League family, where this hippie family has to be rescued from an interaction with aliens. It's the same thing. And Eddie Brock just kind of stumbles into them when he's traveling through the desert. It's not like there's any natural reason or he bumps into them or he has a reason to want to help them. He just fucking walks through the desert. He's starving. They give him food. They pick him up in their van. Venom is nice and says they have a nice family. But the movie never does anything with this, and the inclusion of the family is just so forced because they end up sneaking into Area 51 later in the film when Eddie's brought there and he has to rescue them from this alien invasion. First of all, this just makes no sense and it's a huge plot hole. I get that this family's a bunch of hippies, but they should be smart enough to know not to sneak into a government base, and then they just climb this tower for some reason. And while they're climbing this tower, I'm like, why the fuck are we watching them climb this tower? For some reason, this movie's it's just so fucking goes out of its way to be so frustrating. So then Eddie sees them climbing the tower. Now he's concerned. He's like, you shouldn't be here. course, he's only known them for a day, then the family falls from the tower because, like, the aliens bump into it or whatever, and then he has to rescue them, and then it's, like, totally brushed off. This is what I fucking hate with this movie. They introduce this family just so they can, in the dumbest way possible, find themselves in danger, just so Eddie can rescue them, even though he shouldn't even notice them, like, hiding on a tower. Just so what? So Venom can do something in the movie. So he can be hero, because the rest of the movie has nothing to offer. Like, what the fuck? It's the laziest thing you could do. Eddie rescues them, and then he goes to fight the other symbiotes, but it's not like he has any emotional connection to them. They really could just be these random characters who he bumped into and is paying them back for giving them a ride. But the superhero movie, all he does is fight these dog fighters at the beginning. It's nothing. Why make a superhero movie if you're just gonna have your superhero save like 4 random people who he has no personal investment? It's just so empty and random. I do give the movie credit, though, for giving some personal bonding scenes, like when Eddie's being driven with the family and the little boy in the car speaks to him. He tells him he's afraid of aliens, and Eddie confronts him and tells him that aliens aren't real, and then later, when there actually is an alien invasion, he tells them that one of his best friends is an alien. Will save them, and I do like that. I think that at least the movie's trying to build connection, but there's no foundation to work with. It's like putting the pictures on your wall when you haven't even painted the house. And that draws us to the actual plot, which isn't even driven by the main character. The only semblance of a plot we have are these scientists and soldiers played by Juno Temple and Chiwetel Ejiofor. Again, Marvel trying to draw in people by recasting actors from previous Marvel projects. I'm gonna call him Mordo because I love Chiwetel Ejiofor, but let's be honest, this is a Marvel film. So anyway, these two work for the government, and they're trying to track down symbiotes, and when Eddie Brock is seen on a traffic camera, they follow him and try to capture Venom. There's just one major issue with these characters. It's that they have no backstory. The main character is not even driving the plot. The only character actually driving the plot is a random scientist and Mordo, who have no backstory. It's actually funny how Juno Temple's scientist character has the most backstory of anyone in the movie, who's first being introduced here, yet we really know nothing about her. We know as a child, she and her twin brother were struck by lightning, and as a result, he died and she lived. And the movie does nothing really with that, aside from allowing her to use, like, lightning powers in one scene later in the movie. But it's not like it really matters. It's not like we really care about her character, like she has a meaningful interaction with Eddie Brock's Venom. Like, who gives a shit about her backstory, her powers? It doesn't matter. There's also this random character who has, like, a Christmas tree pin that they have the need to point out for some reason. I thought that was the only moment in the film that felt normal. Like, it just felt like a natural piece of dialogue. And it's not even like that character really even went anywhere. She's just another random scientist who has to help in the end when all the symbiotes are coming out. This literally could be a children's TV show with how simple and empty and pointless it is. No one has backstory, no one has motive, no one has a reason to do anything. They're just kind of doing this because, oh, we need a symbiote action fight. Oh, we need Eddie to have some personal agency. Let's have him save these 4 people. It's just so frustratingly simple and empty. Nothing really matters. Chiwetel Ejiofor's Strickland character, Mordo, honestly is the closest thing we have to an antagonist, yet he isn't an antagonist. He's trying to do the right thing, so the movie's kind of stuck making us not want him to capture Eddie Venom, yet when he does, he isn't really a bad guy, so you're kind of like, you don't want him to die or anything. And then Mordo also doesn't have any backstory or motivation. We don't understand why he wants to capture the symbiotes, why he's so driven to do this. It's not like we understand what makes him this tough soldier. Why is he so determined to do this job, or what led him to be here in the first place? Additionally, he's speaking to this random silhouetted character who never even gets addressed. It's like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 with that guy, like Gustav Frears. I don't know if you guys remember that, but this is such another plot hole. Who is the guy who Strickland works for? Does he work for him? What does this guy want? Do they even include this random guy in the movie? Like, if they're not going to use him, like, what's the point? You already have Null in there, and you're not doing anything with him, so why add this additional shadowy antagonist who just fades into the background because he's barely mentioned? And the rest of Venom, when it isn't this thin thread of a plot, it's pretty fun. Venom dances to Dancing Queen in Las Vegas, hotel suite with Mrs. Chen, the convenience store owner from the first film, who somehow is in Las Vegas when Eddie Brock goes there, and it's very silly and fun and campy, but it just makes no sense at all. Venom has made a point to Eddie that he cannot transform or take over his body, or else Null will be able to track him. So there's multiple points where Eddie's in danger and Venom doesn't transform, or does it very quickly because he wants to keep Eddie safe. So why does he transform to have a dance with Mrs. Chen? It's just so fucking stupid. It is honestly a laughably good time. But can you at least make the rest of the film, like, make sense, or at least include more of these ridiculous moments? Why is it just like this? There's also another scene when Eddie's being pursued in a river by masked soldiers, and he somehow gets a gun and shoots one of them to escape. But while he's underwater, he sees that it's a young woman who he shot, and he feels bad. But he's underwater. He doesn't have goggles. How does he dive down and see this is a person he shot? It makes no sense. My main issue is how this movie goes about having Eddie save people, but he doesn't really want to save anyone. He doesn't want to be a hero. He just wants to have his life back. What even is that life? It's clear he used to have a relationship with Michelle Williams' character, but she's not in this film, so maybe he wants something else. He had this apartment in San Francisco, and in this movie, he makes it clear he wants to go to New York. But why does he want to go there? They don't really make it clear that he has this reason to be there. He's just on the run, and that's it. He just has to escape, and that's it. There's no goal, no destination, no reason you can care for him, because it's not like Eddie Brock wants something that us in the audience might relate to. They don't say anything. And then when Eddie actually gets to New York in the end, what does he do? Spoiler alert, in the movie, Venom dies. And also, Eddie says nothing. He says, no in the most lifeless way. Venom's sacrificing himself or whatever. And then he's just no. And I'm like, that's it? And then he goes to New York without Venom. But all he does is stare at the Statue of Liberty while a Maroon 5 montage of Eddie and Venom plays, and that's the end. The montage is very intentionally funny, but I seriously wonder what is the point. The whole movie's plot goes like this. Eddie is on the run. The soldiers and scientists are trying to capture him. He goes to Vegas. He has Venom transform into a horse so he can ride the horse to travel a bit faster. He gets a ride from the hippie family. They end up at Area 51 where there's this massive fight and Venom sacrifices himself to stop Null from arriving, and Eddie goes to New York. And that's it. Literally nothing happens. It's not like Eddie gets to do what he always wanted, or there is this really meaningful, powerful ending. It's nothing really happens. I don't know. I kind of enjoy watching these really fucking stupid Sony movies. Seeing this in IMAX or in Dolby is just an incredible experience. This movie should not have the blockbuster attention that really great blockbusters out there do get. You can make a really great film like The Dark Knight, and it's going to play in the same way Venom is playing. These are totally different movies. And it just kind of shows this is probably the worst example of the superhero film out there right now. There are movies like Joker 2, which are just so boring and so not entertaining. And I do give this movie credit. At least this movie is pure brain rot fun. Joker 2 is pretentious film bro trash. But let me know what you guys think of Venom: The Last Dance. I do love these movies. I really do. I have loved them as they have gone on. The first Venom was fine. They actually really did care about the design of Venom, about making him a little bit of a villain in those movies. But the plot of the first Venom was absolutely garbage. And then the second one, they just delved right into the ridiculous more. It was really quick. It was really silly. This one is even more silly. And I do love as they get more silly. But you just have to realize this is not a movie. It's an experience in a way. So take with that what you will. I think Venom: The Last Dance is one of the most ridiculous movies I've seen this year. It's got to be one of the most ridiculous films I've seen in a theater. I told you I thought Deadpool and Wolverine was kind of disappointing. It wasn't a movie that I really liked. I am not kidding when I tell you that Venom: The Last Dance was more fun at the movies. It's just so fucking insane that a studio can get away with this and make a movie like this. I just had more fun with it, where I think Deadpool and Wolverine is following structure more, but that movie just ended up being somewhat more boring. I don't know. I do think Deadpool and Wolverine is a better made movie, but Venom: The Last Dance, take with it what you will, is just more fun. So let me know what you guys think. I do hope we get more Venom films. Tom Hardy, maybe he'll return. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks so much for watching.